I have tried basically everything to get people to move over to a Bitcoin standard, to buy their first Bitcoin. If they own Bitcoin, to buy more Bitcoin because it's so transformational and the impact it can have on your life is so material. So I wanted to paint a picture of what life might be like on a Bitcoin standard. This is inspired by true events, but I'm not going to, tell a specific story. I just want to paint a picture of what life on a Bitcoin standard could look like. And maybe it's inspiring to you. Maybe you'll think, hey, some of that might be things that would be good for me or my family, and that'd be great. Okay, so picture this. Um, you wake up and you're mostly caught up on your email, so you finalize details of a ski trip that otherwise you really couldn't afford if you were not living on a Bitcoin standard. So, that's fun. You get all your work caught up, you're ready to go, all of that. You wrap up and you think, okay, it's the end of the work day. Everybody's settled. The kids have their own activities going on. I'm going to go watch a movie. So you decide you're going to go watch a movie. So you get in your car, which drives you there, because on a Bitcoin standard, you feel like you can afford a car that drives you there. On a not Bitcoin standard, you couldn't feel comfortable buying a car that buys you there. But on a Bitcoin standard, you feel good enough about your finances that you get in your car and your car drives you to the movie theater. So there you are. Walk into the movie theater. You've got your tickets. Now, the tickets are comparatively cheap. It's like $11, but in the evening it's like $17. But the Bitcoin you're buying those tickets with costs you like $1. So, it doesn't matter that much. So you buy a ticket and you buy snacks. And of course, the snacks in 2025 US dollar terms are ridiculous. $8, $11, $16. I don't know, ridiculous prices. But again, all of the Bitcoin that you use to buy, or the US dollars you use to buy the Bitcoin when you bought it a couple, 2 years, 3 years, or 8 years ago, you paid like $1 or two or three for all the money you buy with snacks. So you get your snacks, at this point, again, you're using Bitcoin that you've only spent a few dollars for. So it feels like you're shopping in 1950s price terms where everything's just radically on sale. So anyway, you go, you sit down in the movie, and the movie scene opens, and it opens over a picture of New York, and you think, hey, I was just there. Maybe you have a kid who wants to watch Yankees games, and so you took your kid to go watch Yankees games in New York because you felt like you could afford that on a Bitcoin standard. And not that you couldn't if you're not on a Bitcoin standard, but it's a lot more breathing room and a lot easier to afford it on a Bitcoin standard. So you felt good about going to New York to watch a few Yankees games because on a Bitcoin standard, you felt like you could afford it, and maybe otherwise you didn't. So anyway, movie opens up. The scene is New York. They do all their stuff in New York, and then the scene changes and they're going to Prague of all places, and you think, wait a second, I was just in Prague. Maybe your company sent you there, and maybe while you were in Prague, you decided to take one of your kids along, and that would have been a lot less affordable if you're not on a Bitcoin standard. And maybe you want to give your child a special experience going on a work trip with their father, so you fly business class so that your kid can enjoy the amazing, first class experience of your own cubby and seat that lays flat and all of that stuff. And you're thinking the whole time, I can only afford this because I'm living on a Bitcoin standard. Otherwise, we way back in the back of this plane in coach because we just really couldn't feel good about our finances doing this unless we were on a Bitcoin standard. So anyway, there you go. And, you're sitting down, you're watching the movie, and you're thinking, even though you're literally the only person in the theater, you look around, there's not another soul in the entire theater. You think, you know what? The seat next to my seat is actually perfectly centered in the theater. If I move one seat over, even though there's not a single person in the entire theater, I risk somebody walking in halfway through saying, hey, that's my seat. And so again, because you're living on a Bitcoin standard, you buy the seat next to your seat because again, it's $11, but the Bitcoin you bought that's going to pay for that $11 seat cost you like $1. And so again, on a Bitcoin standard, you feel like I can afford that and avoid an awkward interaction with somebody who randomly buys the seat next to the seat you're sitting in. So you buy a second seat and you move over one so that you're perfectly situated in the theater all by yourself with everything just right. and you eat your snacks, which were heavily discounted. You sit in your second seat, which was heavily discounted, and you feel like you're caught up with what you got to do professionally. Again, because you've got the breathing room financially to outsource what needs to be outsourced, to optimize what needs to be optimized in a world that would be hard to do that on finances that were not living on a Bitcoin standard. So anyway, you watch the movie, it's a new Keanu Reeves, movie that's a knockoff of, that's a knockoff of the John Wick series. Anyway, you watch it. It's pretty good. It's fun. And, you walk out of the theater, you get back in your car, and your car drives you home because you have a car that on a Bitcoin standard, you feel like you can afford to be in a car that drives you home. And you also don't feel like you're having to sacrifice everything to do that. You still have the finances to change the world. You still have the finances to fund all of the nonprofits that, you've historically funded. And maybe you put your, charitable giving funds in Bitcoin that you plan to give away long term. And maybe those are higher than they've ever been. So you're funding stuff at a higher level financially, Christian missions and church and nonprofits and all of the things you're passionate and you care about, you're funding those at a higher level than you've ever funded them before because you can, because on a Bitcoin standard, you have the flexibility and freedom to do that you've never had before. All of those things are powerful. All of those things involve living life with margin, um, having space in your life to do the things you want to do that improve the lives of you and your family. And you can do that because you made the decision to live on a Bitcoin standard and convert a large percentage, in my case, 100% of your assets to Bitcoin. And you've been patient enough that those assets have appreciated enough that you've got the breathing room to do all of the things I'm talking about on that video. So I'm not going to tell you if that's like a real story, if that like all of that just happened to me this week. I'm not going to go into that. I'm saying that is what life might be like on a Bitcoin standard. That is what financial freedom could look like. It could look like living in a world where your family loves you, you love your world, your family, you love your professional world. All of that is you're in a world where the human relationships are working, your finances are working. All of that is healthy, and you have the breathing room to do fun things but to also change the world and do things you're passionate about and you care deeply about. And sometimes when you're in that world, you might be sitting in a car that's driving itself thinking, I wish more people had that experience. And you might be inspired if you think, I wish more people had an experience that you have just had, that you might record a video encouraging people to buy Bitcoin because it is the life raft, because it is the escape valve to financial freedom, because it is the back door of the financial system that lets you escape the insanity. And that's what it is. And if you have the patience and the hard work to accumulate the wealth that can be stored in Bitcoin, Bitcoin can be very good to you with that wealth. So that's what my life might look like, could look like, maybe does look like on a Bitcoin standard when you're patient and you're hardworking and you've accumulated assets and you're living with a substantial, or in my case, all of your assets in Bitcoin. That's what it might look like. Not saying it will. I'm not making any promises. I'm just saying that's a real world picture of what it could be. And I hope that's inspiring. I hope people buy more Bitcoin because as amazing as Bitcoin is and as assured as I am that one day it'll be worth substantially more than $1 million, the whole world seems to be asleep. Nobody seems to be listening. Nobody seems to be paying attention. Bitcoin jumps 4% in the last 24 hours. Everybody's asleep. Everybody's asleep at the switch. Nobody seems to care. Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million. It's going to bore everybody to $1 million. And at $1 million of Bitcoin, everybody's going to feel just like they do right now. They're going to say, well, I heard about it, but I, didn't take it seriously, didn't look into it. And now it's like $1 million a coin. So they're going to feel like they were late. Here we are, like 109. And all the people that feel the way they do right now at 109 are going to feel the exact same way. At $1 million of Bitcoin, they're going to feel the exact same way at $3 million of Bitcoin. Here we are. So hopefully that story is inspiring. I'm just trying everything. I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall here, trying every conceivable thing to get people to take Bitcoin seriously and to enable them to get the financial freedom that Bitcoin can provide and the way it has provided for me and that it could provide for you. I'm just trying everything to get people off the fence, get them off of zero, and unleash the potential of financial freedom that Bitcoin provides in a way that literally nothing else in the world does right now. So, have a great evening, everyone. Thanks.